Good evening and welcome to this June 27th meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkman. Here. Trustee Brian.
Here.
Trustee Markey. Here. Trustee Rappin.
Here.
Trustee Ryder.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item tonight will be item number 3, that is a proclamation designating June 2022. Minutes. I don't have it. That's funny. I don't have a right agenda.
You don't
I don't have a right
use
agenda.
that.
Yes. So next is our proclamation designating June 2022 as LGBTQ Pride Month. Whereas the battle for dignity, equality, and personal safety for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning people is reflected in the tireless commitment of the LGBTQ community, as well as dedicated advocates and allies who strive to forge a more inclusive society. And whereas President Bill Clinton on June 2nd, 2000, dedicated June Gay and Lesbian Pride Month to commemorate the June 1969 Stonewall Uprising in Lower Manhattan, and on June 1st, 2009, President Barack Obama expanded the commemoration further by declaring June to be Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. And whereas LGBTQ Americans, including those who live in our local communities, face hate and discrimination simply for being who they are and for who they love, and there remains much work to do to extend the promise of our country to every person. And whereas the landmark Supreme Court decision of 2015 guaranteeing marriage equality in all 50 states was a historic victory for LGBTQ Americans, and continue to affirm our belief that we're all more free when we are treated as equal. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, do hereby proclaim June 2022 LGBTQ Pride Month in the Village of Lake Bluff, and call upon the people of Lake Bluff to wholeheartedly recognize the importance of LGBTQ to our village and nation, and the progress we have made in ensuring equal treatment of all people. Thank you. Next is the consideration of the minutes of the June 13, 2022 Village Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Any change? I hear no change. Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Trustee Brian.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item 5, our non-agenda items and visitors. The village president and board of trustees allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the village board of trustees on any matter not listed on this agenda. Each person addressing the village board of trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Do we have anybody who would like to address the village board tonight?
Mr. President, you do have somebody participating virtually who's interested, and we'll allow them to talk.
Please. Mark, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Go
Good
ahead,
evening.
Mark. Please state your name
you.
and your address, please.
Yes, Mark Stolzenberg, Lake Bluff. I'd About 53 weeks ago, I corresponded with the village board about issues of tree maintenance. And that correspondence was occasioned by a large limb that fell off a village-owned tree on my block onto a power line. That tree limb caught fire, knocked out power to part of the village for several hours, and necessitated a rather significant response by ComEd to fix the damage caused by the limb that fell off the village-owned tree. And to be somewhat blunt, at that time, there appeared to be a two-pronged approach toward tree maintenance that the village was taking. One was gravity, and two was cut it down when it dies. Around the time that I raised this, and I believe Mickey Collins also made a presentation on best forestry practices, we'd heard from village staff that there was some sort of plan in the works to adopt a more comprehensive tree maintenance program to both maintain a very important natural resource here in the village, which is our tree canopy, something that we should never take for granted because it's a wonderful part of our town, and also for purposes of public safety, because obviously it's not very safe when large limbs are falling from the sky. And I'm not aware of where this stands, and I've occasionally watched village board meetings. I've not heard it mentioned since last year. This issue fell quite literally into view once again a couple of days ago. On Saturday, I returned home from a work trip, and I found a very large limb had rotted and fallen off another village-owned tree in front of my house on the parkway in an area where my kids play. This limb was about 6 feet long. I would estimate that it was in excess of 100 pounds. And again, it fell, it was rotten, and it fell from a village-owned tree. Had this fallen on someone, it probably would have killed them. I circulated photographs, I believe it was earlier today or yesterday, to show you the scale of it. And I photographed my 2-year-old daughter standing next to it. You can only imagine what that would have done to a child. My kids playing that parkway, and had that limb been on the other side of the tree, it would have caused some major problems. I pose to you now, where have we come in the last 50 weeks on the creation of a comprehensive tree maintenance program? It's very important for this village for two reasons. Number one, public safety. Again, we should be minimizing the number of tree limbs that are falling from the sky. Number two, maintaining one of our most important natural resources in this village, which is our tree canopy. I look forward to hearing from the village administrator an update on where this stands and how this is going, and the progress that has been made on making sure that we are doing everything we can to maintain this very important resource for our village. Thank you much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
There doesn't appear anybody else raising their hand. Do you want me to talk about that now, or?
I think that would be good.
Okay. Jake, you want to come up? So, hey, Mark, it's Drew. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I had emailed a little bit with Mark about this issue, and so I think the good news is that the conversation, Mark, that came up several weeks ago has manifested itself into the village's budget, which was approved, and it's effective May 1. So the new budget has money in there to do I would say, a more aggressive, consistent grid work on maintaining trees. The village still continues to do that ourselves internally, and we also respond to other activities, tree removal activities and tree maintenance activities and service requests. So all that continues, but we're going to supplement that with additional help that will, based off the village's purchasing policies, we're developing an RFP that will hit the streets no later than the end of next month. It'll probably be sometime in the mid-month. and hit the streets, and the board can make a decision on, that's the good time. And most of this work, Jake, in terms of tree trimming, when does that usually occur?
We'd like to start this in November. If we started sooner, we run the risk of skipping over multiple trees because we can't trim certain hardwoods in the summer, typically oaks, not good to cut them. So after the growing season ends, about mid-November is when we would like to start, and that way we won't get a bunch of work done, then have to double back and then chase down the trees that weren't able to be done in the middle of the summer.
And Jake, this tree that fell on East North, I think like the other tree, I think you guys looked at it when it happened, you were there.
Yes. And we kept the part that, and the picture that shows, we have that, and that's not a rotten branch. I mean, that was full live, I have pictures, very green. There was no.
It rotted from the inside. I mean, I think someone would have seen that if they were up in the trees.
Well, there was no included bark on it to indicate that maybe it had cracked and then started to heal itself and then fell again. From everything that we can see and that you would see from being in that tree, or you probably would not remove that branch. Full health, fully green.
It had been cut back, though. There were saw marks on the end of it.
Lower branches were probably removed in the past for clearance, or maybe there could have been a dead branch hanging down on that was removed.
Okay, I mean, because it looked like a fairly fresh saw mark.
Well, that might have been part of the cleanup.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What's that?
Yeah, that's all right.
That would be from when the cleanup. That was huge. That was a really big branch, very green.
Like 20 feet long and tall.
At least. I do have some pictures of it. I mean, it was big and it came down. And unfortunately, this happens. And this is not the first time this has happened in Lake Bluff, and this won't be the last time. Even with a comprehensive tree trimming program. I mean, I don't know who was here in 2011, but one of the roughest years on record for tree work that I've ever had. I think we hit back-to-back storms starting in June and ending July 11th, which was the last one. Not saying that this is okay and that this should not happen, and I understand that, and it is very concerning, but it can happen.
It's twice on the same block in a year. I mean, it suggests to me that if it's happening this frequently in such a small space, it's a much bigger problem across the village.
Yeah, to that, once you said 53 weeks, so it was a year before.
It was June 14th when we had to come down the power line, arcing and knocking out power to part of the village for several hours. June 14th of 21. I'm looking at the picture right now of when it was arcing and smoking.
So can I ask a couple of clarifying questions about the photos? The photos that Mr. Sulzenberg sent are of what remained of the tree limb when he arrived home, and it was much
Bigger than that.
much bigger than that. And so the diameter that we're seeing in one of the pictures looks to be, wish I could put my glasses on, 18 inches or perhaps, about 18 inches in diameter. That's where the cut happened for the piece that was taken away.
The balance of the branch, yes.
So that fresh cut that I'm looking at is anyway on one of these pictures, and of course not everybody can see what I'm looking at, but one of the pictures that he sent has a very fresh cut, and that cut was earlier in that same week when they took the rest of the branch away.
Yes.
Yeah, that's from the cleanup.
And what you're saying is that the branches that you cleaned up had
Been trimmed.
leaves.
Oh, yeah, very
Leaves
green.
on them.
Very green, big bur oak.
So what we're seeing is the stump of the remainder of the limb that was still there by the time, for whatever reason, it wasn't taken when the rest of it was taken.
That's correct.
Taking nothing away from the overall point, that we need to have a comprehensive survey done regularly so that we can minimize the number of times this happens, right? And so Drew, maybe you can explain, or perhaps Jake, you can, what is the plan for the RFP? What precisely would our public works people continue to do? What would the vendor do? How frequently?
So previously, up until about 2012, when EAB took over, we would do a grid cycle. And so it was a 6-year revolving cycle. We started, I can't remember exactly. So one of the grids, which is probably where we would start this one, would be from Arbor to Center. And then the following year, you would do from Center, I can't remember the exact road. I'm sorry, I can't remember
But
exactly.
the town was divided up into
Six
sections.
sections. So it was a 6-year revolving cycle.
Yeah. And so we would spend time working our way through those sections, doing,
Plus doing removals and service requests at the same time.
yeah.
see.
So,
And the
so-
EAB was Emerald Ash Borer, which kind of was like a shift because of the,
It was a
Incredible.
shift and
Yeah.
also a shift in manpower.
yeah.
So, Jake, so adding resources to this effort, so from 6 grids, I mean, a 6-year effort, how is this going to improve your maintenance, having additional budget sent to you?
Well, I think what we could have is one grid would be worked on. And then we would be able to handle any removals that are, of course, that we can handle with the size of our equipment. Plus, we can handle all service requests that come up on top of when we have storm damage and other things. Plus, then we would know that each year, a section of this town would be taken care of at that time. Plus, we could come back and handle any service requests that came upon us.
and it would go from 6 to 5 at the most in terms of the areas. We would divide the town up. We talked about doing 3, but probably being 5, and that the 3 to 5 is where it should be in terms of a good maintenance program. And we're looking at other communities which have similar outsourcing of this program, have outsourced their program and taking best practices when it comes to, writing the specifications about what should be removed, when it should be removed, and the like. But the goal is to have a more consistent and more quick turnaround in hitting each of the sections of the community on a more regular basis.
Go ahead, Kate.
I think the couple of things that came to mind in the emails exchange that I saw was the issue at 26 North Avenue, and this is why we need to why this is long overdue, with all due respect, but we don't have the equipment and none of our staff is trained or insured to climb. So the ability to maintain trees that are 60, 70, 80 feet tall is hampered by the fact that we don't have a boom truck and no one climbs. So I have about 30 plus trees on my property, and the guys climb because you can't access trees with just a boom. So a lot of this is, the outsourcing is not simply looking at the inventory, but actually doing work that PW cannot do because it's too dangerous, they're not trained to do it, and the liability should be shifted, and the insurance liability should be shifted to a different company. Hopefully, one that has enough of a staff and equipment inventory to do this on a basis that's more regular and not as stretched out, because maintenance is what prevents loss. So it was EAB, now it's two-line chestnut borer and other issues that are coming about. So I think we should think of this from the standpoint of what we can't do because of the limitations and why we have to do this, because it's money well spent. For example, Jake is in a situation there's nothing he can do anything about. He has to wait and rent a lift to deal with that other tree. And you still can't climb. Nobody climbs.
Correct.
So that even with the lift, you're limited on how high you can go. So it's just essential that this happen sooner rather than later for public safety, and also so that PW can do other things. You guys only have a limited staff, so this would give you more time to do other things. So I think it's just something we have to do as soon as possible.
Thank you, Kate.
If I might, I may have mischaracterized the effort to just an inventory effort, but to your point, Kate, it's far more detailed than that. and far more physical work than that. So it sounds like we have a plan. If we're putting the RFP on the street by the end of July, when do we think, we think by November we'll be cutting our first limbs? Is that the idea?
Barring something unusual in the marketplace, which has been somewhat unpredictable with contractors. And
Yeah.
we've even had experience with that for trees that we can't reach or certain things. We've been outsourcing those, and where it used to be, we'll see it tomorrow.
Yeah, it used to be 3 days, 3 to 5 days. Some of our more regular guys with Lucas, or they would be here and clean cut, they come right away. Now we're 14 to 25 to some 30 days out. I think it's the marketplace. I mean, I think more, everybody is stretched kind of thin these days, and it's tough. It's tough to get people to come out.
That's my concern with that, the late date of July is that the November date, and it's fine, because you could do it in December and January for dormancy. So
Absolutely.
Dormancy happens later and later because November's so warm. So if it was December, that would,
It could easily be December, yes. I mean, it gives more time for people to bid too, if we want to, and to respond. And yeah, it does, we kind of do have that. My personal take is we have a shift, is that we're way nicer farther in. I mean, we didn't even handle snow till December 28th this year. So, I mean, it stayed warm here, and our springs seem to be a lot colder, wetter, and just not nice, I guess I could say is. And it stunts the growing season though. And you do see it in the trees around here. You do see our canopy having issues because some trees that are so used to living in a normal environment, all of a sudden are shocked and they're changing their environment. I think we see a lot with the crab apples, and a lot of the understory trees they don't like the new environment they're in, and they don't make it.
I think I would just say too that if we're headed down looking at more outsourcing, which I know we've talked about for a while now, it might be a good time to look at everything. So look at the equipment needs of Public Works, look at the where we can maybe get some more efficiencies and work in tandem with the outsourcing. So kind of look at the big picture rather than just, hey, we're bringing in an outsource group now, and you guys are doing this over here. Outsource group is doing this. It might be a good time to kind of sit down and just reflect on all of that, our needs, our total needs.
It's true. And that's what we did with snow plowing, right? We find a firm that has complementary equipment, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Thank you. So what I see also is from a community discussion standpoint, we had a Mickey Collins coming to us and saying, okay, 25 trees is not enough, and we're now doing 100 trees per year. We have Mark, who talked to us 53 weeks ago, and we have taken the steps to take care of that with new budget and new actions and considering equipment and liability and how we can outsource that. So I think we're taking the right steps. Now, are we taking the right steps for the job? And to your point, it should be 3 to 5 years, and we're still at 5 right now. We still have a good discussion for that, but I think we're in the right way right now.
I think the other reason we did have a bigger, or a longer cycle being 6 years, because it's just what we can handle in a year.
I know.
It's just that X amount of trees can be done.
It's capacity.
And it's the capacity.
And Bob, our arborist, made that very clear. And so we're throwing more money at it, more budget, and we're going to get to the right cycle. So thank you.
And to be clear, I don't want my comments to be taken anyway as an indictment or anything of Public Works. Jake, I think Public Works does a fabulous job. You guys do, with your resources, you do a great job for our village. And, trying to maintain a village full of trees is something that you shouldn't be expected to do. So thank you for all that you do. You do a great job. You and your team do a great job.
Thank you.
And thank you to the board and everyone for this discussion tonight. Look, happens once. I can shrug it off as an occurrence. Happens twice, particularly that close to home. It gets my attention. So I appreciate the discussion tonight about this issue. Thank you.
We appreciate your feedback, Mark. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. And I really regret such a thing could actually endanger the life of your 2-year-old daughter. So sorry about that.
Well, didn't endanger her life, but it could have.
It could.
Yeah. When large limbs like that start falling from the sky in front of your house in an area where your kids play, it'll get your attention, put it that way.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Any more comments online?
Doesn't appear so.
Thank you. Next is item 6, Village Board sets the order of a meeting. The Village President and Board of Trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during the Village Board meeting. Do we have any requests? Thank you. Going forward, next item is item 7, our Village Finance Report. Item A is our warrant report for June 14 to June 27, 2022. As a summary of background and reason for request, expenditures of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $213,338.47 for June 14 to June 27, 2022, for again a total expenditures of $213,338.47. You will find reports and documents as attached, and specifically the warrant report for June 14 to June 27, 2022, again for an amount of $213,338.47. The invoice register report shows checks with a status of open or paid. All checks with a status of open and are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval. Checks with a status of paid are manual checks processed. And I should have asked for a motion for this item.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Great.
Roll call.
This is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Brian.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is our May 2022 financial report. Mrs. O'Connell, could you please give us highlights?
Sure. Good evening. Noteworthy items found in the May 2022 report include the monthly sales tax revenue on a cash basis for May FY23 of $238,213, which is $4,309 or 1.8% greater than the FY22 cash basis receipts of $233,904. Building permit revenue for fiscal year 23 to date is $24,364, $4,540 less than the same reporting period last fiscal year. General fund fiscal year 23 total revenues of $1,072,231 or $286,871 greater than the fiscal year 22 year-to-date revenues. This is primarily due to accounting accrual entries related to vehicle licenses and business licenses that are booked later in FY22. FY23 current expenditures are consistent with or less than budgeted for the total general fund. The fiscal year-to-date expenditures of $452,637 are $87,234 less than the expenditures for the same period in FY22.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions? Any more questions? This is a voice vote,
Yes.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. This
Motion to accept, we need a motion to
Need a
accept.
motion to accept it. You didn't do a motion at the beginning of.
okay. So
Looking for a motion to accept.
could I please have a motion to accept?
So moved?
Second?
Thank you. So again, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Next is our village administrator's report.
Just really quickly, this weekend is like peak special event season in Lake Bluff between Farmers Market, which is Friday 7 to noon, which is usually the most well-attended farmers market. And then we have on the 3rd, the Fireman's Ball, the one fundraiser for the village's volunteer fire department. And then, of course, the parade at 10 a.m. on Monday. So big week. And Jake's crew's out there vacuuming the village, making it nice for all our guests showing up. 20,000 of our closest friends will be here. Anticipate a very large crowd. And I think the parade's hovering just under 100 entrants, as last I heard.
Wow.
Nice. Thanks,
To
Jake.
normal.
I have a quick question. Do you know how we get tickets to the Fireman's Ball? Do you have any
You show
idea?
up that night.
Usually they mail them out, but we didn't get anything in the mail this year.
You can just show up and pay at the gate.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you. Any more, Evans?
No, sir, that's my report.
Thank you. Next is our village attorney's report.
No report tonight, thanks.
Thank you. Next is item number 10, the village president's report. And tonight is the appointment, discussion of the appointment of Paul Bergman to chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Is there a motion to
Approve the appointment.
approve the appointment?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Consistent with his dedicated volunteer efforts on the Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals, and after seeing the Choose Lake Bluff Historic Preservation Program to completion, Mr. Stephen Kraus has served with distinction as chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, HPC, since his appointment in 2018 and recently expressed his desire to resign. Village President Charlot recommends appointing Paul Bergman to chair of the HPC. Member Bergman has served on the HPC since 2003, and if the proposed appointment is approved, his term as chair will expire on April 30, 2023. So following past recommendation from the board, I have had the chance to have a originally 30-minute, then 2-hour meeting with Mr. Bergman, where we had great conversation and discussing expectation as part of his board, but is actually very fundamental to the character of his community. And I can say that I was pleased with this meeting, and I'm pleased to recommend Paul as the next chair of the HPC. Questions?
None other than appreciation for taking on the role.
Yep. And I'd like also to express my deep appreciation to Steve Kraus, who has really done an exemplary job for the community, for a policy that makes sense for the community for historic preservation. He came to us many times and we every time said no, and he went back to work and came back with a policy that made sense for our community. And it was a hard job. I would not have been pleased to do that job myself. And so to that, I really, really, really commend Steve for what he did for our community. And I hope Steve is listening. It is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? This appointment carries. Thank you very much. Next is item 11, acceptance of a correspondence. Please note that all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational reports on June 10 and 17, 2022. Any questions? This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Need a motion to accept the correspondence.
Could I please have a motion to accept the correspondence?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions again? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The acceptance of a correspondence motion carries. Next is item number 12. A resolution approving a site plan for the farm at 921 Sherwood Drive. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. The village board conditionally approved a special use permit for the farm, a proposed new indoor sports practice facility in March 2022. As part of satisfying those conditions, on June 7, the Architectural Board of Review reviewed proposed exterior changes to the property, which include a new entrance doorway on the front of the building, replacement of wall lights on the backside and sides of the building, the addition of a wood fence to screen a dumpster, and parking lot improvements. The ABR voted 4-0 to recommend that the village board approve the site plan. Any questions? And could you please introduce yourself?
John Seaman from the farm. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Any question to John?
Sean, I think when you came before us the first time, one of the concerns that people had was one of safety with the, knowing that children were gonna be here and there were gonna be a lot of cars. So, looking at this, could you just help us understand what steps you're gonna take to make
So,
changes?
the addition of the front entry door, that's actually going to be the drop-off location for guests that aren't old enough to drive and park there themselves. So we're eliminating them walking on either side of the buildings into the back, and even having to turn around to get out of the location. They can pull in on the west side of the front of the building and leave on the east side of the building.
Great.
So I appreciate the board's suggestion on that. It's actually worked out really well. And it's allowed me to rethink the whole facility layout and able to kind of put in a study hall too for our kids. So it was a good addition.
So that impacted the interior as well? by
Correct, yeah.
having
So I
to-
ended up leasing the front third of the building, and it's really helped out. It cost a little bit more, but it's all for the kids, right?
Sure.
And then in the back, we're going to do the parking for guests that are of age to drive and stay there. And it's a complete loop out. It's not, you don't have to pull in and pull out. You can work your way around.
Oh, that's good. So no 16-year-olds will have to back up? That's good.
Yeah, just to get out of the spot, just a little backing, but that's it.
So, and I was just going to ask about the front spots. So
Yes.
the idea is that you want people to park towards the back, because if you've got pickups coming through the front in that kind of that U driveway, right? And then you've got people parked on the angle. I'm just thinking of the high school right now.
Yep.
So when you have people parked on that angle right there, they're kind of trapped, right? When the cars are coming through.
Correct.
So you're going to encourage kids to, the kids that can drive to park in the back?
Yes, correct. Any member that is old enough to drive and park is going to be forced to park in the rear of the building. The front spots will be used for overflow parking, like if I do an event or something, but I don't really see them being utilized. Or it could be for parents waiting for their kids' lessons.
And then you're just in a situation like at the high school where you just have to kind of wait until that.
Correct,
that
but
car line.
hopefully the parents will have a little more patience than the kids. Stay in the
You would hope
cones.
so. And the spots right next to the building, those are parallel parking spots there?
Correct. Those are just existing spots that are there currently. So we really didn't change any of the layout in the front because that's for the current user in the front. That's remaining in there also.
I like that you added a lot of lights, so, and I think.
Yeah, the lights, and there was fixtures there. They just were not operating, so we repaired them. It's lights up the parking area well, but doesn't really go much past the parking area. So, and not really any neighbors to bother anyways.
Great. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Would you like to make a comment or?
No, I just appreciate all the input and advice, and I've learned a lot through this whole process, so it's been a lot of fun and tiring.
Very nice, thank you.
Oh, I had one last question. When do you intend to open?
Hopefully September 1st.
Thank you.
Awesome. If there are no more questions on this item, this is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Inkman?
Aye.
Trustee Brian?
Aye.
John, thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you. Have a
luck.
great evening.
Next is item number 13, an ordinance granting a variation from village accessory structure setback at 305 East Scranton Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. In December 2021, village staff were notified by a complainant that a pergola was being constructed without a permit at 305 East Scranton Avenue. An inspection found that a pergola, or two connected pergolas, was constructed without a permit approximately in the corner of a lot. This location is within the 5-foot side and rear yard setbacks applicable to accessory structures. Following meetings between staff and the property owners, Joseph and Alexandra Peck, on March 28, 2022, the applicant submitted a request for zoning relief to retroactively authorize the pergolas. In their application, the applicant asserts that the pergola is necessary for the applicant to protect their children and visitors from falling black walnuts being dropped by a tree located in the lot abutting theirs from the rear. At its June 15 meeting, the PCCBA conducted a public hearing and unanimously recommended that the village board grant the requested relief with a number of special conditions shown in the attached draft ordinance. In summary, the applicant must: 1, remove a pergola if the applicant moves. 2, remove a pergola if the abutting tree comes down. 3, obtain a building permit for the pergola. 4, anchor the pergola securely to the ground. And 5, comply with any drainage conditions upon the building permit for the pergola. And I see as a note that the imposition of penalties for violation of the building regulations, meaning work without a permit, was not within the scope of a PCCBA public hearing or the standards for variations. These are imposed administratively by the building commissioner and would apply whether or not the variation is granted. Questions on the board? And could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, Joseph Peck, 305 East Scranton.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions?
Kate, are you going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say that's not a pergola, but that's okay. That's something else. I mean, a pergola generally has openings. It's what you grow vines and stuff on. So these look more like a shelter. They're
Well, Joe, you provided us with a PowerPoint. Would you like to show that PowerPoint, or do we have a capability to see that PowerPoint? That might,
I think we all have a copy of it, don't we?
yes, we do.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take through the PowerPoint or address questions as one-offs, whatever you prefer.
I could ask Drew a question. So Drew, historically, do we have many variances, many issues like this where something is built and irreversible or somewhat irreversible and we've granted permission?
After it's been built?
Yeah, or have offered variances to the 5-yard, the 5-foot setback?
Yes, I'm thinking actually most recently there was a garage. If you recall, there was a large two-story garage on a more property that I think it was a much older structure that had been present before the village's regulations came into place and a daylight plane and setback issues. But yes, there has been relief granted for accessory structures in required yards.
And when there's a neighbor that is not on board, I mean, I think if there's the size of the house is a certain size, you have to get a certain amount of neighbors to approve. Does that precedent exist here as well?
No, the village process involves a public hearing at the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals where a certain radius of neighbors are notified.
Yeah.
And they are given the opportunity and notice to make their concerns or support known at hearings. And so that's what resulted in, I think, some comment on both sides of this issue. No, that in this matter and this level of relief, the PCCBA has recommending authority to the village board, who then has the final decision.
Yeah.
So like them, you would take into account most likely comments from neighbors and looking at the standards and seeing do they meet the standards to, in your review of them, and justify the relief required to maintain the structures where they've been built.
Got it.
And Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have precedents on these kinds of things, right? We try to look at these as each individual case. We don't say, oh, because we granted a variance at one house, then that becomes precedent in our community as how we manage things?
No, I mean, legally, no. My answer is always you look at each application separately. I will say, though, if we ever got challenged, the person we denied would obviously look to other situations where we granted, and unless we would have to distinguish them in order to make our decision rational, or to show the court that we made a rational decision.
Okay.
I would say one thing that's unique about this particular recommendation from the PCCBA is that it was highlighted in the memorandum that this is relief that's granted tied to the survival of the tree, and also the residents continue to occupy the property, which is a little unique.
I'm a little bit torn on this one, just in that, right, the PCZBA approved this, right? So we like to go along with them the majority of the time. And Mr. Peck, I understand you guys coming and not knowing, you know, what the policies were here or the zoning. I too have this type of tree in my front yard. I too raised a bunch of kids that survived. They managed to survive. Without any concussions or anything terrible. You certainly have made the most out of this. It's a beautiful sitting area, and I'm sure a great addition to your lawn. It does trouble me a little bit that you know, the permeable piece, but I think we're covering that in that we'll have folks go out and look at that. But it does bother me a little bit, the precedent that would be set here. So I'll just state that.
Comments from other, Kate, Barb?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've been down this road before in a different way. When we had a couple in here who had demolished a home without permission. I have a serious problem with this, and I appreciate the fact that when people move here, they may not know, but it's incumbent upon them to learn. This is a very small town. You're walking distance from Village Hall. Everyone here is amenable to having questions answered. So in my experience, also having grown up in a house with a black walnut over it and sitting out on a screened-in porch that was there and part of the house, and you know, I mean, they're huge. I get that, but this structure is so big, and the area in which it is built is so small. If it were elsewhere in town where people were farther apart, I think it might not have the same impact, but that is wholly irrelevant. It was done without permission. And my fear is that when we start to go down these paths, even though we're not setting precedent per se, we're sending a message out that says we're okay with this. And I just don't think that's, and then, so it's on a case-by-case basis, but it's really not, because people think that it's okay. And how many people have we said no to over the years who aren't new? Or in my case, to build a garden shed, it'd have to be 75 feet away from the fence line because I happen to live on a corner lot. Thank God my corner lot's giant. Whereas other people just throw up a garden shed and hope they don't get caught. I don't love the situation of saying, well, you know, it's beautiful. It is. That has nothing to do with this. I just don't think we can do this. I can't feel good about allowing this and then thinking that we're going to get lucky later and not have people think that we're okay with it, because it's just not.
I'm happy to comment if.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, appreciate the comments, and obviously a lot easier to ask permission than forgiveness. We'll be blunt. We moved here from Northern California. We had an out-of-state contractor put up the pergolas for us. He did not make us aware of the zoning issue. We also called the villages, and they said a pergola is permissible because it's not a permanent structure. It's not anchored into cement. At that time, we were not made aware of the 5-foot setback, which is a predominant issue here. On our end, and we're perfectly amenable to any and all of the additional requests that the zoning board made. We didn't put this up for monetary reasons. I mean, it's certainly terrific that other folks have had experiences with black walnuts, but at the end of the day, I think we've all realized via COVID that time outside is precious. We want to enjoy the fruits of our backyard. We have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn on the way. Again, it's wonderful that other folks haven't had adversarial or, you know, potentially traumatic instances with black walnuts, but all it takes is one. Just one of them has to fall and hit one of my kids. And similar to Mark's comment earlier, you know, a tree branch is different than a black walnut. I certainly appreciate that, but this was not put up for entertainment purposes. This was not put up for aesthetic purposes. This was put up to protect our children and allow us to utilize our backyard. We're perfectly amenable to having the tree pruned. Lake Bluff's arborist came over to our home and said, that's not a feasible solution because it will throw off the balance of the tree, and should we encounter a large windstorm, it would actually push it into the south-facing home where the tree currently resides. This is not something that we put up with the intention of selling the home at a higher price. This is not something that we constructed, again, for aesthetic reasons. This is purely for our own peace of mind and so that our young children can use our backyard.
Thank you.
So-
We have two more trustees to make comments.
So if we had a homeowner who went through what the process is, instead of building first and then finding out later, they would have been made aware of the setbacks, and I'm assuming they would have either kept within the setback or then said, I wish to go in the setback, let me ask, my neighbors, let me draw up these plans, let me ask for a variation. So that's the normal process. And when somebody either knowingly or unknowingly varies from that process, it puts us in an awkward spot because we then have to say, oh, what was your intention? Or why didn't you? Do we have to ascribe, bad motives? Will that influence our decision? And we try to not do that. We try to just say, well, wait a minute, there's a process. So if that setback had been honored, what is the setback and how much would that affect the structure that's there? Would it be 5 feet smaller on the back and the side and it would touch the garage? Is it a feasible thing to create a structure that is within the setback, that does satisfy having space that's safe, where you can put the sandbox or whatever it is that you want to put for the kids? And might that have been the path that would have been taken if we didn't have it backwards, where we're blessing something that's already up?
Well, there were, in the initial meeting we had before we came before the zoning body, that was, of course, one of the immediate recommendations. Why don't we just push it forward so that the 5-foot setback is no longer problematic? Certainly that would be something we would be accommodative of. The solutions that were put forth, though, where you could put up a smaller netted structure with some overhead protection, unfortunately, according to the building commissioner, that would require a permit as well, because that's a similar structure to the pre-existing pergola. The other solutions were to put a fence between the 5-foot setback and the adjoining fence to ensure folks can't get back there, but that doesn't offer overhead protection. And if any of you have kids or grandkids, it's pretty hard to monitor them 24/7 in small space. The other solution was simplistically don't use that portion of your backyard, which again, with young kids, that's a awfully tough thing to monitor and a tall task.
So the structure, if no variance had been applied for and you just did it within your right to build, again, would it be 5 feet smaller from the back and 5 feet smaller from the side? Then you'd be okay because there's a 5-foot setback? Is that
They would satisfy the setback.
Yeah.
right?
It would-
And so how many square feet is it now versus how many less square feet? This is a question that I kind of would have hoped that the PCZBA would have kind of sussed out. And that would be,
If I'm answering your question, the pergola itself and the supports below it that anchor it, those wouldn't be smaller if we were to move them 5 feet forward. Again, the reason for the proximity of the pergolas is that's where the tree branches overhang. The tree is about a foot north of our adjoining back fence, and the tree branches are roughly 40% over our yard in the roughly 10 to 12 feet structure where the black walnuts fall. So the goal is, again, utilization of our property and quite frankly, just peace of mind for us.
Right. So, but my point is, if the structure extends out into the yard close to your house at a certain point, you're then safe. And so the whole structure would be smaller if you didn't eat into the backside back, the backside back and the side yard setback. That's the point that I was making. It would just be a smaller structure.
Or it could just be shifted, right? You can just shift the whole thing.
Yeah, you could,
Yeah.
you could.
And that's to your point earlier,
right.
Trustee Ankerman, as Mr. Peck alluded to, when this first came to the village's attention, we went through all those alternatives. Like, what else can you do? Would you consider moving it? Would you
Right.
consider, we looked at all different ways to try to solve the problem they were trying to address, and ultimately they chose to seek the relief, knowing that they may not get it, but that's
Right.
where we ended up.
You could move the whole structure or make the smaller structure and plant bushes and things that are still beautiful, but your kids aren't going to be
Back there.
playing t-ball there because there's a bunch of bushes there.
Correct.
And so it is a possibility that the structure could be moved 5 feet away from side and back, right? It is a possibility at this point.
I don't think there's anything obstructing it. There's no other structures. There's not a swimming pool. There's not any.
No, we would not be able to satisfy the 5-foot setback to the side.
It would have to be made
All the
smaller.
way to the garage, correct? Garage to the
Right.
side fence.
Correct, so it basically touches the garage, it touches our side fence. That would simplistically satisfy the 5-foot setback from the south-facing yard, but then we would have to take one of the two pergolas, it's two separate
Right.
structures,
Right.
out. And again, that leaves us with tremendous amount of unusable space in a relatively small lot.
Right. Well, I guess the point I would like to make is that this is an example of putting us in the hot seat as opposed to if procedures followed, then you're not out, your investment expectations aren't set that, hey, we already have this, you're taking it away from me. And it's just, I think it just speaks to how important the process is. And so when I look at this, I don't want to be the person that takes it away from somebody. And I look at, what other solutions are there? It is unfortunate that you might not be able to use part of your yard because of that tree, but there are a lot of things unfortunate about a lot of lots.
Am I right in understanding that the walnuts only fall from September to November? So it's only a 2-month time period, really, where it's an issue?
Well, September, October through November. But, I mean, obviously, if the walnuts fell in January, February, March, it's not a big deal. But as you all know, September, October, November are 3 of the months that we all like to be outdoors the most. So those are the times when my children are outdoor the most.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Susan, did you want
No,
to?
no, go
I have
ahead.
one more.
Go ahead.
So,
Joy.
one of your neighbors mentioned something about grading, like a change in grading, and I'm interested in that, and also what the permeable surface is that's underneath the pergola.
Sand.
So, but this is a flooring, right? This is,
Sure, but it's tough to see, but there's slats in between each one of the tiles there, so it drains directly to the sand immediately below it. In addition to that, the flooring is actually, what would it be, south to north sloping, so any drainage issues actually just go into our yard as opposed to other lots.
okay.
And Glenn actually came out and took photos, so on and so forth.
Thank you. Any more comment from trustees? Susan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one as well. See your black walnut and call call your black walnut, because I've got 2. But it's beside the point. It is a trouble. I appreciate that, but I also appreciate that you've looked at the alternatives. One question I have is you have spoken to the neighbors, the 2 neighbors that are most directly impacted are the ones to, well, I can't, I don't have the
South-
numbers, to the
it would
back
be
and to
south and east.
south and east?
Yeah.
Okay. And neither of those have a concern?
So the south-facing neighbor, who the tree is on their lot, that was, again, we weren't aware of the need for permits. That's water
Okay.
under the bridge at this point. We asked him before erecting the structures if pruning his tree was an option, and he said no, and the village arborist confirmed that. So he is the gentleman with the issue with the pergolas. Our east-facing neighbors actually wrote a letter of recommendation for the utilization of our pergolas. And I believe there were 16 or 17 other letters that came in from folks in East Lake Bluff recommending the utilization. As, you know, we have Easter at our house every year. We have Easter egg hunts and all this stuff, and we're very involved in the community at this point in time, and, you know, would just request utilization of our backyard.
So I'm clear, I'm looking at a plat of this, and so the neighbor that's particularly concerned is the one most impacted, I guess, is what you're saying? Right behind the pergola on the opposite?
There's really no impact to our south-facing neighbor because, again, the drainage runs south to north into our yard. The neighbor that theoretically would be impacted, if you're looking at grades, is west to east in Lake Bluff. Topographically, the watts on the west side are typically higher than the watts on the east side. But both the so it's 309 East Scranton, if I remember correctly, is our eastbound neighbor. Both the previous owner wrote a letter of recommendation because the support structure it sits on had been there for over a year, so they'd seen no drainage issues, so on and so forth. And then the new neighbors who moved in the last 3 months also wrote a letter of recommendation for the utilization of the pergola. The other item, and this is neither here nor there, but I didn't give the entirety of the presentation via the PowerPoint, is, of course, we asked around in the community to folks we know who live in East Lake Bluff, you know, did you guys do anything when you erected theirs? And if you look at the PowerPoint slide, you know, we have 4 neighbors that we know closely who have pergolas in the back part of their lot, not tied to the zoning or whatever it may be. It's just we happen to have a neighbor who called out. Again, that's neither here nor there. It's not something we were trying to skirt one way or another. We were just unaware of the 5-foot setback. And yeah, call it naive first-time homeowners, call it naivety for being out of state, call it, you know, using an out-of-state contractor, but, you know, most certainly if I could do it over again, would request the variance on the front end as opposed to the back end. Absolutely.
Thank you. Susan, Barb, sorry.
Barbara, sorry. So the contractor to do the work has to be licensed, registered, whatever it's called, with the
Licensed.
village, right? And so they need to be aware of permitting and setbacks and all that. So what does that mean for that individual who forgot or didn't know? You know, I mean, because that's kind of why you pay them, so that they, and why we have them register with the village, so that they know and can guide
The process.
the clients. And so, I mean, is there any recourse to that individual to say, you know, well, we shouldn't renew, or, you know, here's the book, read it, there's a test? Yeah, I don't know. It
Yeah.
just seems like they should have known.
Yeah, have they, do we know the name of the contractor yet? Has that,
It's Mike Croft.
okay, I don't know that that's been known before.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it.
Yeah, but we could, I mean, usually, yes, they do come in and that's the goal for the reasons you've already outlined. The idea is to be, you know, be able to know who to ask questions,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
And so that contractor didn't follow the, you know, I mean, anybody who's a contractor knows what you're supposed to
It's
do.
a pretty common requirement on the North Shore.
Yeah, so the other thing is, I don't know what the PCZBA was thinking. I don't know what the rationale was. You know, they just didn't want to be bad guys. But we rely on that board to kind of do the heavy lifting and to ask all the questions and then make their recommendation. And I like to follow what somebody who has done the heavy lifting, you know, says, because I can respect and understand. But this one, I mean, I didn't attend the meeting, I didn't view, and perhaps I should, you know, bad on me, I should have watched the PCCBA meeting. But was there any rationale for saying, for this case, it doesn't make sense to require that they make it smaller and stay within the setbacks? Do you know if there was a rationale that I just don't see?
Well, Glenn?
Hi there, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, so Trustee Ankerman, to your question, you know, the PCZBA doesn't create formal findings of fact. I can tell you, looking here through my minutes, they spent about an hour deliberating on this topic. I would say most of that time was spent considering the presentation of Mr. Peck and the public comment that was received. Probably the compromise row was, I think the consensus of the group came together when Member Russell suggested those conditions of approval, including the inspection of the drainage and the requirement that the pergolas be taken out if the Pecks move or if the tree comes down. And I know the Pecks agreed to it at that time as well. So I'm looking through my notes. There was some discussion about the different alternatives that were looked at by the Pecks along the way. One of those alternatives was, as Mr. Peck more or less described, the same way he did at the hearing, moving it or shifting it or making it smaller. And what he described is, in essence, what he said at the hearing, considered by the PCC. So, hope that answers your question. I'm happy to keep happy to answer any more.
Well, I think I've said enough. I wish we didn't get put in this position. Welcome to Lake Bluff. We love you, but it's the process. There's a process, and it's frustrating that we get put in this position, and I don't know how we ended up here. So,
Kate.
I just want to point out, this is not a pergola, okay? It just isn't. A pergola is open. So that's I work in landscaping. It isn't a pergola.
Oh, no,
It's
I was
it's
just
a
going to say,
shelter.
this has slats that
Well, okay.
move, so it can be an open air structure.
It's a pergola that you're referring to in gardens. It looks a whole lot different. My question to Drew was going to be if you had seen this, because it's, I'm having a tough time imagining what it's like to look at this from the person that lives behind.
thank you for saying that, because
this is very,
But we have a declaration from a supportive neighbor, correct?
Yeah.
For this structure?
regardless, would this have been approved? I mean, I understand this is an aesthetic question, but I've never seen anything like this here in town that's at this scale and style. But my other question is, why is it perpendicular to the garage? You have so much room there, it appears from the drawing. Why not run it north-south and parallel to the garage?
It's all tied to the proximity of the tree and where the walnuts fall.
So if you just turned it, you'd still have that proximity, and you'd be running, and you'd be 5 feet off, and you'd plant some arborvitae, and you'd be good to go. I don't understand the perpendicular nature. If I had designed that for you, I would have put it parallel to the garage. I never
Well,
would have done that
If
that
it
way.
runs parallel to the garage, then we have roughly 12 feet by 12 feet of unusable space, potentially a fair amount more. So it's the same issue as the setback that we're running into.
Right, and I understand that, except I think somebody said, this is, I mean, all of us have parts of I have 3,500 square feet on my property I can't use for anything, except a rain garden. And
Sure.
no offense, but that's just the way it goes. That's not, respectfully, when you come in before us, that is not a reason. That is not a rationale for doing what you did. You should.
So I can appreciate the sentiment and understand the comments. I don't know if we're able to pull up the PowerPoint, but there was some verbiage tied to zoning and why variances are approved, why they're not. This is a condition deemed to be a hardship as opposed to a minor inconvenience. Certainly, if we had a simplistic tree behind us that dropped leaves into our backyard, that's not problematic, and that's not a good rhyme, reason, or rationale for the utilization of these two, whatever you'd prefer to call them.
So let me summarize what's happening here, because I think we're going in circle right now. And Kate, I'm sorry, I stopped you on your fault. So let me try to summarize what we have said on this board, if I can. We have a case of forgiveness instead of asking first. We have a black walnut that is a treasure in a garden. Now I'd like to comment on the 55 mile per hour. This is not true what you have here, because there is a velocity and air resistance. My background is engineering.
Yeah.
Not correct. It's not 55 miles an hour, it's probably in the 10 to 15, okay? We have a process that is, I hear one of the main issue here is a process was not followed. It puts us, it is difficult for his board because we'll be faced with the same issue with people not following process. We want process. We hear the PCZBA had a compromise with you. That is that if you leave that property or if a tree comes down, these pergolas will disappear. Okay, this is what we have in front of us.
I can bring up the presentation if you.
Sure.
Would that be helpful to the trustees?
No.
I think what we're struggling with is the fact that if the process was followed and this came in front of the PCZBA, more than likely, they would have said something like, it's gotta have, they would not have approved this. So I think the issue that I'm hearing from people on the board is that now we're in this awkward position where it's already up, and we're being asked now to say, hey, it's okay that you didn't follow the rules, even though you didn't know, and I understand, you moved somewhere new, you don't know, I understand that. But I do feel like it sets kind of a precedent that I can come into the village board if I do something that isn't to code, and I can ask for forgiveness, and there's a good chance I might get it.
Yep.
So that, I think, is our concern, and I don't know that seeing the presentation again is gonna change anything with that.
No, I think this is the goal of my summary is to put all the points objectively. I mean, we want to be supportive at the end of the day, but I also see body language on this board that is, we are embarrassed and we are a little bit confused with a 420 on the PCZBA telling us it's okay. Well, we have to deal with the aftermath of a process that is not followed, and that will be with you and that will be with other people. So this is, whereas we would like to be nice, it is hard. More comments?
Just procedurally, you should be, you can know, I'm sure you know this, but the idea that, this is first reading, and you can also postpone a vote until you wanted to review, either until the PCCBA approves their minutes, or you can review the video. So that's also an alternative, rather than voting this on first reading up or down, you can also postpone it to go back and do that if you'd like.
Should I have a motion to postpone this as necessary?
If that could be an action taken tonight, I just want to throw that out there.
What does that mean procedurally? When will we hear it again? Or
When should we do a date certain?
Can I make a motion?
Please.
Okay. I would say, Mr. Peck, I have a tremendous amount of empathy because I've got a backyard set up like this. I've got young kids, and I understand the issue. Unfortunately, I mean, it is beautiful, but if you moved to just one and then had dead space around it, you're going to lose some space. But you could have the kids safe and have a smaller one pergola instead of two and have some dead space. I would like to make a motion to deny the request.
So there's already been a motion to approve, so we gotta
Okay.
vote on that or defer, but that motion's been made and seconded.
So we could say nay, and that would be the same as what Mr. Rappin is proposing.
Oh, is that the same, or is?
It is.
Would not be the same.
No, because then we'd have to vote on
We'd make a second motion.
to deny it.
You could make a second motion to deny. If you make a motion to deny, and that is adopted, then because there was a public hearing attached to this, any alternative would have to go back through the process again. Wouldn't come directly back to the board. It'd have to go through the ZBA again.
Versus voting down a motion to approve.
Correct.
Could you say that one more time? I'm a little slow.
We can't, and I can't hear you very
Oh,
well.
I'm sorry. So right now, there's a motion to approve. If there's a motion to approve that's been made and seconded. So if you vote on that and that is not approved, if there are not 4 votes in favor, then that motion fails and there's nothing before you now. Then the slate is clean. You have to decide what to do still. If you did nothing, I would say, Drew, if you did nothing and just adjourned the meeting after failing to approve, generally in the village, we would declare, we would interpret that as a denial. If you wanted to, a lot of villages will take that extra step and actually do a motion to deny to make the record perfectly clear as opposed to failure to approve. But procedurally, if you didn't do that and you just adjourn the meeting, it has the same effect because there was a public hearing. There's nothing left to do, and so then it would die.
So if we deny it, then the goal of having the PCZBA say you have to start the process over again happens? Is that right?
Up to the applicant.
So the applicant can decide whether they want to say, okay, here's my desire to build this thing, may I do it?
Not the same thing. There's a year delay, I believe, between filing the same application again. If there's something different about the application, they could go back to the PCZBA and ask for a new relief because it's different, but they can't just go back next week and file again the same thing.
I
There's a
see.
delay.
So the location would make it different, and the physical
Size.
structure and the size would make it
Correct.
different. And if there was some landscaping involved, that would make it different. So there is a way to make it different without incurring a year delay.
Are you asking?
Well, I think that puts it in your court to the extent that if are you willing, the board, I think that's maybe a question the board's indirectly asking of you, would you consider altering your plans that they can refer it back to the PCZBA that would require less relief? Or maybe have a different, the idea is now it's 1 structure versus 2, or it's set back it's a different plan.
Right.
One that may involve landscaping
Right.
and/or reduction in the number
Right.
of structures.
And one thing I might benefit from is knowing with some experience what the grading impact has been. I understand what you're saying is that it ought not, it should, all excess water should run to your yard. I'd be interested to know with some passage of time whether that's actually happening or if something unexpected is happening. So there is some additional information that I could benefit from, though I just throw that out there. I think that the drainage issue, as we know, stormwater issue for all of town, but in particular, the east and the west terraces, et cetera, is particularly acute. So that's one thing we haven't been able to identify fully yet. What ought to happen with the water is actually happening with the water. But perhaps I'm not understanding it.
Glenn, as part of the hearing at the zoning board, did that come up? It's my understanding that the stormwater issues of this property has not been problematic.
Not been a problem.
Glenn, am I wrong about that, or?
Yeah, there was an assertion made by that southerly neighbor behind the rear property line that this may cause issues. I don't think that there was any evidence to support that. We talked about grading a bit. I would point out that you could change the grade in this area without variation.
Nope.
There's only one limited circumstance in which we require drainage plans to be submitted in connection with construction in the village, and that's for an accessory structure like this. And that's if you're taking a set off to your floor area ratio for that. So some communities on the North Shore do have more stringent requirements, but not in Lake Bluff.
Have we had a significant rain since you've put this in? Have you been able to see how the drainage?
We've had no problems,
No
nor have
problem.
our neighbors.
And the folks just immediately to your west, 301 East Scranton, those folks that sent the letter in saying they would not like the variance, did you speak to them? Do you have any understanding of why they would not like that? Did they just not like looking at it, or?
Well, they don't see the pergola. Our driveway is between them and the structure, so, no. But I know they're good friends with the folks
People behind you?
with the people behind us, so I would suspect they asked them to submit a letter on their behalf. I don't know that. That's
Speculation.
my guess. But no, we actually talked to them since then, and they were actually unaware we had a structure in our backyard, so.
Well, you can't see it from the street at all. I know that because I ran by your house today. I didn't see it at all.
One thing that I would like to say is that, I've sat on this board for 9 years, and over 9 years, a lot of issues come up. Some are unique, some come up over and over again. And the longer that you sit here, the more you realize that everything you do is going to affect the next volunteer who has to sit here with a neighbor who is nice, just like you, who is kind, just like you, who has children whom they love, just like you, and all these things. And here we are, sitting on the board year after year, having to do what we're charged with so that it just doesn't become either the Wild West, or if I know you and I like you, then you get the exception. None of us is getting joy out of this at all, and the more we talk about it, it means the longer before we get to go in our own beds, because we're gonna be here probably till 10 o'clock. And so nobody here is getting joy out of this, and I've done this for 9 years.
Yeah, I can understand and
Yeah.
appreciate the situation that this puts you folks in, similar to the zoning board. We understand the need for rules, regulations, and following the letter of the law. The reason we pick Lake Bluff as opposed to the hundreds of other communities we theoretically could live in is objectively the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And yes, if you have people running rampant, erecting structures here, there, and everywhere, it will diminish the community feel. Again, this was not a structure erected for us to monetarily benefit.
Understood.
For us to entertain. This was purely erected for our peace of mind.
I understand.
Again, I fully understand that other folks have had black walnut trees. Maybe every parent has a different feeling or level of comfort.
Right.
Even if we move this setback forward, we put bushes up, we put trees, we put shrubs. What's to stop them from walking back there?
Right.
So
understand.
I think from the conversation we're having right now, I don't think the vote is going to be very positive anyways. There is a different possibility to reconsider the plan, to resubmit to the PCCBA. And I would really advise you to go back to your family and to see what kind of other solutions you have.
There
and
are no other solutions.
And resubmit a plan to the PCCBA before, instead of us having to literally deny this request.
The problem is there are no other solutions to keep our children safe in our backyard. That is the problem. We can't erect an overhead structure because it runs into the same zoning variance as a pre-existing structure. We can't put foliage back there. We can't put bushes back there because our kids can still walk in that area of our backyard. Again, I understand that you can't erect structures willy-nilly. Had we known, we certainly would have followed the guidance.
But Joe, seriously, my kids survived with black walnut in my backyard.
It only takes
My kids
one.
are 16 and 19, and the 55 miles an hour did not kill them. The same thing with other people on this board.
It only takes one.
But if you went down to one pergola and moved it 5 feet off the rear,
Then we have unusable space in the rear that our children can access, and we have unusable space to the east that our children can access.
Understood.
That actually creates a bigger square footage area of unusable space in our backyard. Personally, if you have us erect a fence which was one of the recommendations previously made. If you're looking purely at aesthetics, a fence on top of a fence, I don't know that that's aesthetically a more attractive fixed structure. Again, this is purely for the benefit of our children.
Mr. Peck, I think we appreciate the goal that you're trying to achieve, but I think what is being confused here is the requirement to follow a process. Our obligation is not to ensure that every premises is safe. That was, I hate to say caveat emptor, but that's a condition on the property that's not ours to ameliorate for you by granting you relief that you're not entitled to. That's what you're asking us to do. Barbara has articulated very well the position that you're putting us in. I understand that. I really do, but there are dangerous conditions on every single piece of property everywhere for little kids.
This is not on our property.
I understand, but it is by virtue of the fact that that's overhanging. So I don't think there's a way for us to get our point across that it's just, you're putting us in this position where you're asking us to give you relief you're not entitled to under the ordinance. You've done something that you weren't supposed to do, and you're asking us to give you the relief because the tree endangers your children. But if you'd gone through the process as you should have, the answer would be, you would still be with the same condition with the setback. You would have had the setback, and you'd have to learn to live with it. That's what we're basically saying, is we all have conditions we have to live with, and many of us have raised children with those same conditions, whether they're on your property or an adjacent property that affects your property.
Sure, but this-
So we
this
can't
isn't-
say yes because of that, because it's not equitable. That's not our role here.
This is, the purpose of a variance is when a hardship or a circumstance beyond an inconvenience places itself at your footstep to provide an opportunity for some relief. I mean, you may feel at peace putting my children in danger. I don't.
So we have in front of us two
That's a
choices.
bridge too far.
So we have two choices. Either we have a vote, or you can ask us to reconsider that and go back to work with a PCCBA. This is your choice at this point.
I mean, I'm just. Oh, what's better? I don't know. What do you recommend?
I would work with what I have. I would find different alternatives. I don't think you're stuck. I think you have 4 or 5 things you can do in front of you. And I would go back to work with a PCCBA to get a different alternative. We're all sensitive to what you're going through.
You're
We
not.
all have kids. We all lived in Lake Bluff. We all have walnuts falling around us. And frankly, we're sensitive to your ask. We are just saying we have also our own constraints. And we don't want to actually prevent from being your family at safe.
I just want to point one thing out. I think the failure to follow process puts us in a difficult position, but what our responsibility is to do is put that to the side, I think, and not give advantage or disadvantage. At this point, had this come before us at the time it was supposed to, would we have granted the variance? And what I'm hearing is no. And that unfortunately causes a great deal of hardship in terms of making changes. But I like to separate the process issue and not punish unnecessarily for having violated the process. I don't know that anybody's saying that, but I just want the petitioner to understand that. What we're saying is, let's put ourselves back to status quo ante and figure out whether we would have granted it. I dare say the PCZBA would not have, and nor would we have granted it had it come to us in advance. So I'd be hard pressed to vote in favor of it, given that.
you asked for general advice, I would say, ask the board for a continuance and then see if
Right.
there's some other creative solutions.
There aren't, but great. Thank you.
So,
I move that we continue this, another,
The next board meeting.
The next board meeting.
yes.
thank you.
Need a
Second.
Voice vote.
Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion, the continuance carries.
That's until which board meeting, Drew? To be clear about it.
First meeting in July. So
July
that's the-
11th.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item is item 14, a trustees report or trustees report. Do any trustee wish to make a report tonight? I hear none. Next is item 15, the consideration of June 13, 2022 executive session meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any comments on these minutes? Thank you, clerk. Please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ingerman.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item 16, executive session, and I do understand that we have an executive session tonight. Might I get a motion to go into closed session to discuss, one, disposition of property, and number two, personnel?
Well,
So-
let me just be a little bit more clear about that. It's under 2C6 and 2C5, the purchase or the setting, the purchase of or the setting the price for the sale of village property. It's both sides of the equation. Because we're going to be talking about acquisition and we're going to be talking about disposition of village property and personnel as well.
So we are discussing acquisition of village property and disposition of village property, is what we're saying. And personnel.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Can I please have a motion on that?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Roll call vote.
Roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ingerman.
Aye.
Trustee Brienne.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you. So this concludes the open part of the village board meeting. Thank you to anyone in attendance, and have a great evening.
Okay.
We just, we have just come in.
Absolutely.